Good evening, everyone. My name is Sean Lim, and I'm the Director for District Implementation for First Robotics Canada, and welcome to our fifth installment of the Ask the Experts webinar series for the 2016-2017 FRC season. I'm joined once again by Paul Keenan, one of our first senior mentors, also on staff here at First Robotics Canada. Paul, how are you doing this evening?
Sean, I'm good. I was muted there, but you surprised me a little bit there.
I don't think I've done a very good job of introducing you for the first few webinars, so I wanted to make a point of doing that. But Paul will be moderating for us. And if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to enter them during the chat, and Paul will do his best to see if we can get them answered during. And if not, we do have an informal question and answer session at the end of it. But today's topic is going to be on something called first choice, which we'll give you a little more details about, but in a sense it allows you to select some items for your robotics team for free prior to the season starting. And in order to sort of give us some expertise and some advice on the best selecting the best items for your team, we have a great set of panelists joining us this evening. With us on the call is Thuvishan Rajagulasingam, who is a mentor for Team 1241-36 based out of Mississauga, Ontario, Rick Hansen Secondary School. And Thuvishan is a mentor, also the drive coach and the design sub-team lead. Thuvishan, glad to have you on the webinar with us. And Thuvishan, can you tell us just a little bit more about yourself?
Thanks for having me, Sean and Paul. I guess to give you a little brief, I've done every facet of FIRST probably known, offered in Canada. I've gone through the FLL program, done VEX even. I've participated as an FRC student, and this would be my 6th year returning as an FRC alumnus for Team 1241 at Rick Hansen Secondary School. Yeah, that's a little on me.
Awesome, Thuvishan, and you and I actually shared the field together back in 2013 at the World Championships, and which was a particularly successful year where you had the opportunity to actually win the World Championships down in St. Louis. So great to have a fellow world champion on board with us. Also joining us on the webinar is Andrea Valenzuela.
Glad to be here.
And also joining us on the webinar is Andrea Valenzuela, who's a mentor for Team 1360 Orbit Robotics out of Oakville, Ontario. And Andrea is a mentor on the design and manufacturing sub-teams of the team. Andrea, would you mind telling us just a little bit more about yourself?
Yes, hello. Let's see, 2005 was my first year in FRC. That was quite a while back. So I've been able to see the evolution of how different the robots are. So it's always been good. Yeah, I'll be finishing college this year, and then I'll have to be into the real world, deal with that scary real world stuff, being an adult. Yeah.
All right, well, thanks for being on the call, Andrea. We've known each other for a long time, and you've been one of my best resources when it comes to the design and manufacturing side, and I'm glad to have both of your expertise, Thuvishan and Andrea, to be able to talk about these first choice items. But before we get into the details on the actual items, I'm just going to take a moment just to explain what first choice is. And so first of all, I think most people on the call are aware that once you register for the FRC competition, you will receive, as part of just registering for the event, a free kit of parts. And in that kit of parts, there's a very, very large collection of parts, retail value north of $15,000. And I put a link on my presentation here, and also it'll go up in the YouTube video of what last year's kit of parts is. And so I'm not going to go through the entire list here, but I'm just going to skim through it just to sort of show you just how comprehensive of a list it is. So when you go to your kickoff event, you'll receive a few boxes. In fact, you'll receive a gray box, a yellow box, a box containing your drive base, and another, maybe you'll have a bag of separate items as well. And actually, I'm just going to clarify that. If you are a rookie team, you're going to get sort of all those boxes I mentioned. If you're a veteran team, you're actually not going to receive this yellow tote, the yellow box here. That's really only for rookie teams, just to give you a bit more of a head start. But some of the items you're going to carry over from year to year, which is why in your second and third year, you don't need to receive them. But if I were just to click on the gray tote checklist here, and again, I'm not going to go through every item, but here's a nice little list just showing what comes in that box. Very, very expansive. And on top of that, there's another set in the yellow box. The drive base will also give you all the parts needed to be able to build a fully functional driving platform to be able to build the rest of your robot on top of. And so every team will receive this drive base kit unless you are a veteran team who has explicitly said, I don't want to receive this drive base kit. And in lieu of the drive base kit, you receive an extra set of, or rather a $450 voucher to AndyMark, which is a very popular robot part supplier. And so the kit of parts, in terms of the hard goods, if you're curious what you get in that kit, you can go to this link, and in fact, you can just search kit of parts, FRC, and you'll get this page. And you can click on these 4 links here to tell you what's in those 4 boxes that you receive, or 3 boxes if you are a veteran. On top of the hard goods that you get, what's really nice is that you will also receive a whole series of vouchers, and these are pretty much as good as cash vouchers, coupons for a whole bunch of really great robotic suppliers. I encourage you to check these guys out as well. And for those of you who are really into computer-aided design, and maybe you're a teacher who's always wanted to, teach SolidWorks or Autodesk Inventor or PTC Creo, as part of registering for the FRC competition, you are actually also able to request a series of software licenses for those CAD software packages from Autodesk, PTC, and SolidWorks, as well as a whole slew of other really, really useful software, both for robotics, some for math, some for statistics. But if you are looking for some software to use to support your FRC teams, take a moment to look at the software list because there's a lot of very high value software that is considered part of the kit as well. Now, in addition to these 3 or 4 boxes that you'll get, and the vouchers, and the software, what's really cool is that you are actually able to customize your kit of parts as well. And so that is what the first choice process is. It allows rookie and veteran teams to be able to select from basically a menu of parts online to be able to customize your kits. And actually that process will be happening relatively soon. In last year's season, First Choice basically opened up around middle of November. We're expecting it to happen around the same time as well. But that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to look at last year's menu of items. And our 2 panelists, we're going to ask them a few questions on, what were really good items for them, what different situations did they run into that affected their decisions. Maybe if they wanted to design a robot that did a certain thing, they might change their choices a little bit. But First Choice, basically, you're given a fixed number of credits, and you make your selections on First Choice to almost purchase what you want with those credits. And if there aren't enough parts to service everyone's request, there's a little bit of a lottery system. But essentially, that's the process that we'll talk about today. And I don't think I'm going to get into the whole priority list system right now, just because I want to leave as much time talking about the actual parts and the choices as much as possible. And so here I'm going to have to qualify things a little bit. I'm going to show you what the First Choice website looked like last year. And so I need to be very, very careful during this webinar because the list of items on First Choice does change every single year. So the items that we're going to look at today, there's a very high probability it's not going to be the same list as what you guys will see a week from now, 2 weeks from now on this year's First Choice. But there will be some overlap and enough where the panelists and myself will have seen, some items on this list for a good number of years. So there will be a little bit of consistency, but please don't make any major decisions. Don't make any huge assumptions that the items that we'll talk about will for sure be on the list because they may not be. And so the first question that I would love to throw out to my panelists is 1241 and 1360, 2 very experienced teams. I'm curious to know, what do you feel are your must-have items for your teams, for the situation that you're in right now? Thuvishan, Andrea, if First Choice were open right now, what are you going to get for your teams? What do you feel are must-have items? And I will swing this over to We'll throw this one over to Thuvishan first. We'll let you take the first crack at this one. But Thuvishan, what are some of the items that you would definitely get?
For myself personally and for Team 1241 Theory 6, definitely just because we build 2 robots every year and understanding what our priorities are, we do have a lot of inventory on stock. We would spring for the new 2017 international game option that first released, which does take a 20% hit on our number of credits potentially available to us for the 2017 season. So what I'm essentially saying is we would sign up for a boulder per se, which is the game ball for the 2016 game, but we would try to get as many game pieces as possible.
Okay.
Just because we know we go through them pretty quickly.
All right, and I'm just going to jump in on that one. So this is obviously last year's game that we're looking at, and you'll note on my, hopefully you can see this on my screen, but during last year's first choice, it says maximum quantity per team, 1 boulder. And I'll tell you right now that if we only had 1 boulder to test with, pretty much the first time we ran a boulder through our very first shooting mechanism, that shooting mechanism probably would have trashed that boulder. I think it did for my old team. And so having only 1 boulder would have been a really tough situation. And so this year, yes, the international teams are, which includes Canadian teams, are given an option where we would be able to surpass this limit and order extra game pieces. Of course, we don't know what the game pieces are, but the only downside there is that the additional game pieces are going to come at a pretty heavy price. They're saying 20% of your total first choice credits. And I think using last year's numbers, you're probably talking like 100 additional credits around that ballpark. I don't really know for sure what it's going to be, but you're paying a hefty premium for that one. But Thuvishan, you're saying that it's worth it, at least for your team, to take advantage of that?
Yes, for sure. Okay. Just because we know we'd like to have as many on hand as soon as possible.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that one. Andrea, for you, from your side, are you going to take advantage of that option as well, 1360, or would you?
Well, I'm not sure about my team, but there seems to be a lot of like points left over after you look at the items that you want to go for that you don't really know what to do with. There's just a lot of small parts, and it's stuff that you don't really need, but you just kind of end up using the points because you have them. So it's not a terrible option. I'd say 20% is worth it to have it right away.
That's a really interesting point. Points left over and not being able to spend all of them. I've been in that situation, surprisingly, probably for the past 2 years, where sometimes I just fill my cart with stuff that I don't know if I really need. And in hindsight, you know, maybe if I'd just gotten this boulder, it would have been a better use of our credits. Thuvishan, have you ever been in a situation where you've had credits left over as well, same as what Andrea said?
100%. We end up picking up extra power poles, or we'll end up picking up stuff that's 5, 10 credits just to kind of fill up the order.
Okay, so it sounds like from the 3 of us, we'd probably take advantage of that extra boulder or extra game piece, whatever it is, even for that 20% hit. That's really interesting. Thuvishan, I didn't mean to cut you off, though, because I know you've got a lot more items, but good conversation on the game pieces. Sounds like we would probably get that game piece.
Yeah, feel free to jump in anytime, Sean, honestly, and Andrea as well. Conversation's good and enriches the conversation when we go back and forth. But I guess a few other items I'd definitely pick up, and you kind of have it in your view in the top right corner. It's the RS775 motor, just because I don't know if it was necessarily released at the initial first choice release last year, but those went out of sale very quickly on the Vex Pro website. And these are one of the most highly rated and recommended motors out there. Just to give Vex Pro a little plug right there. These motors would come in handy, especially for all veteran and I guess any veteran team that has started to do their own custom design and is designing mechanisms based on motor specs and starting to calculate a bit of their loading on their motors. This is probably the way you want to go, especially for its value of credits, which is only 50. A few other things that I might pick up as a veteran team are probably, not to go too fast, but the electronics on the actual robot. So a spare pneumatics control module, power distribution panel, voltage regulator module, Talon SRX, and Victor SP. And we can kind of go through them if you want to go into detail of what those exactly are.
Yeah,
it just kind of helps our team, especially because we build a second robot as a practice bot.
Okay. Yeah, we'll talk about these items very, very quickly, but the major ones that Thuvishan was talking about are, I guess, the power distribution panel. Sorry? but the power distribution panel, already, like, these go out of stock all the time. And this is a very, very custom-made part. Hello? I hope I didn't get cut off there, but it sounds like that I might have been.
I can still hear you, Sean.
Nope. Okay. My apologies, everyone. But the power distribution panel is definitely one that Thuvishan mentioned. This is a very, very specific panel. This is not a commonly available item. It's basically only made for FRC teams, and it does go out of stock very quickly. And so I know a lot of teams pick up this one right off the bat, even though you will get one of these in the rookie kit. I don't believe you get these anymore in the veteran kit. So I think it's a very popular item for veterans. I'm not sure if Thuvishan or Andrea, you might be able to jump in on that one.
That's correct, Sean.
So you do not get
rookies are the only ones.
Okay. And so for veteran teams who like to have a backup or who build practice robots, very huge. Voltage regulator module, this is your lifeline. It powers all the critical electronics on your robot. It's always nice to have a spare or two of those. And again, they go out of stock very quickly. The pneumatics control one, I think, is a little bit iffy, only dependent on whether your team actually uses pneumatics on your robot. And I know 1241, you guys use it quite religiously. Andrea, on your end, for the teams that you've been on, are you guys heavily involved with pneumatics, or do you tend to shy away from it?
Definitely with a new team, it's difficult to get the system started, but from a design perspective, usually kids and teams, they tend to, put an actuator on everything. It just kind of makes design a little bit more simple. It can make a few tasks really easy because you don't need to do so much programming. It's kind of an on or off type thing. So pneumatics can be really useful for a new team, just because once you get everything in there and it's all communicating, the actuators are very easy to mount and get them to do what you want it to do.
Right. And so I think the philosophy on 610 has always actually been, we're not going to use pneumatics unless we absolutely have to. The majority of the years, we find a reason where we actually absolutely have to, so we do end up putting it on. But there's been a few years, like in 2012, where we were more than happy to not have any pneumatics at all, so as not to overcomplicate. But if you are going to pursue pneumatics, you definitely want to have a few extras of those. And Thuvishan, I think you also mentioned some speed controllers. And so the speed controllers are down here. You basically have three different options that you mentioned. One is called a Talon SRX, one's called a Victor 888, one's called a Victor SP. They all generally do the same thing. They all allow you to run your motors, not at full speed necessarily, but if you want to run a motor at half speed or a third speed or in reverse, this is the circuitry that allows you to do that. In terms of, which one of these do you get, the newer versions are the Talon and the Victor. And actually, I should also mention the Spark motor controller over here as well, which is a relatively new product. In terms of which ones you're going to choose between these, I guess this is one which there's a lot of personal preference here. Maybe I'll swing over to my panelists very quickly, but Andrea, if you had to spend some credits on some motor controllers, and given that some of them, three of them are basically 100 credits, and the Victor 888 is 50 credits, which ones would you get and why?
If I was a team that didn't have a lot of resources as far as funding, I would definitely still go for the Victor 888. It's been around forever, and as long as it's legal, it's just as good as the other ones. A little bit larger, a little bit harder to sneak into small spaces. So don't get any chips on it, and it'll never fail you. So.
All right. And Thuvishan, you might have a differing opinion on that one, but what would you choose for yours?
Sorry, I kind of cut out for the question itself.
What speed controllers would you choose for 1241 if you're making this choice?
We'd be probably going with the Talon SRXs, just because that's our go-to and we've been using it for the past year.
Okay, and the Talon SRX is one that uses CAN serial communications, which is a little bit more of an advanced feature, but it's probably the most fully featured one. And if you were to buy these retail, the Talon, I believe, would be the most expensive one as well, but a great value option for the Victor 888s. Yeah. And the other guys I've seen used very, very popular. 610 uses the Victor SPs just because they're very simple, but they're also, reliable, but they're also a little bit more expensive than the Victor 888s. I've also heard very good things about the Spark. In terms of buying them retail, I believe the Spark is the most cost-effective modern one, because I think, as Andrea mentioned, the Victor 888s are a little bit older, but the Sparks are a modern motor controller. But I think the price point for them, if you were to buy them retail, is probably the best. Andrea, I'm going to swing this over one to you. Surprisingly, we've really only got 10 minutes left, but any other kind of must-buy items on first choice that for sure you're going to try and get given the opportunity?
Well, usually once the big ticket items kind of tend to get a lot of stock, there's a lot of small stuff left. And something that I always like going for is consumables, things like robots. If there's a pneumatic system, you're going to go for those air tanks. Those black leopards are quite nice, and it's good value for points. And just things that tend to get used up, like other pneumatic parts. But something that's quite nice is the sensors. There's a Hall effect sensor available that's only 10 points. You only are allowed to get one, but it's very good for setting up like end stops, or when the robot is moving, you put it on the magnet on the part that's moving and the encoder on the part that's stationary, and when it meets, it stops. There's also a gyro and accelerometer. If a team was looking to get more into autonomous mode, that's something they'd want to go for.
So Hall effect sensor, okay, pneumatic tanks, Hall effect sensor, and the accelerometer and gyro. I'll just pop that one on very quickly as well. But the air tanks, great value. Again, if you're a team that's exploring pneumatics, teams generally put a lot of those air tanks on because they almost become like a second battery, a second power source for your robot. And regularly we see 4 to 8 of those tanks, if not even more in some cases, being thrown onto those robots. Buying them retail, they can add up pretty quickly. But through first choice, I don't even recall there being necessarily there must have been a limit on them, but to max it out, very good value there. And again, the Hall effect sensor is probably one that not too many people are familiar with, but if ever you need a switch just to detect the limit of an arm or anything of the sort, sometimes if you put a mechanical switch on there, the switch gets smashed into by your arm and tends to break. The Hall effect sensor is actually it's a magnet and a little sensor board, so whenever the magnet basically gets close to the sensor board, it acts just like a regular switch and it throws it. So it's a very nice way of detecting when something has reached a limit without actually needing to make mechanical contact with it. And the gyro and the accelerometer, this is a really interesting one because I didn't even realize this, but last year it costed you 0 first credits. And I don't think these come in the kits anymore because a lot of teams just don't use them. But if you are sort of a team with some programming background and you're trying to get your autonomous programs just to the next level, a gyro is huge in terms of getting your robot even just to drive straight. But this is a relatively good gyro that can be had for a very low cost. I would highly recommend this one as well if you've got some programming expertise. And I guess if it's 0 credits, again, there's probably not much of a downside to that one. All right, well, thanks very much for sharing your perspectives on those ones. That's your perspective as a veteran team. Now, I'm just going to turn the tables on you guys just a little bit, and I'm going to ask you guys to put yourselves in the shoes of some of the rookie teams which are out there. And I think maybe if you were to start a rookie team today and do this whole selection process, my guess is that maybe your thoughts on what to get might change a little bit. And so, Andrea, I'm going to throw this one at you first. Let's say you are starting a rookie team, and say you're low resource, you don't have a whole lot of tools, you're starting from scratch. Now, what are the things that are you really looking at in terms of your first choice items? Has it changed at all?
Okay, usually speed controllers tend to be the most expensive. When you need to suddenly buy, 4 of them, it's a big chunk to change. So I would go probably go for the SP, the Victor SP, but those tend to get grabbed and it goes to the lottery. So I'd stuck up on the Victor 888s. You're basically saving your team $300 if you get 4 of those. So it just directly goes into cost savings. If I was doing pneumatics, I would pick up the pneumatic solenoids, the double valve kit for 100 credits. That tends to be like a $90 item as well, so that's always good. Battery charger is going to be handy because you're going to go through them. If you don't have a laptop to run your driver station, the Classmate's also a good option, but it is a little bit pricey now. For 150 credits, I'm sure the students have laptops, but if you really need one, that's there. And the Xbox controller is much better than the joysticks that come in the kit, so I'd optimize for one of those. The kids usually know how to use them already anyways. And that's most of the good stuff. The flute multimeter is another nice one. It's 100 credits, so it's a bit pricey, but if there's nothing else, that's a really good tool to have on hand. And maybe some extra motors. The PG71 motor is a bit slow for most applications, but it does work, and if you don't have anything else available, it's a good choice, and for 50 credits, it's not too bad.
All right, so I'm just going to click on the items here just to show everyone the items that you're talking about, but I will actually circle back onto the Classmate PC. I just want to point out that for rookie teams, you will actually get one of these Classmate mini laptops in your kit, and so Andrea would be suggesting this. If you were to order it on AndyMark, you would be getting a second one, which for some teams, you know, it ends up being a pretty good investment, but you will be getting one already. And that last item you mentioned was the PG71, which includes the gear motor, I'm assuming. So the PG71, it only has 50 credits. This tends to be a very interesting value item as well, because when Thuvishan was mentioning that other motor, the 775, that's just the motor, and those little motors, or these little motors rather, they spin at 18,000 RPM or somewhere around there, which is a really high rate of speed, and a lot of times you have to interface them with the gearbox to get a slower, more useful speed out of them. And this in particular is a pretty nice combination that's easy to work with because you also get the gearbox along with it. And so even though the motor spins super fast, there's a gearbox that comes with it so that you get a nice reasonable speed coming out this end, which gives you a fair amount of torque along with it. So Andrew, some really nice selections there. And Thuvishan, actually, I'll swing that same question over to you. As a rookie team, put yourself in their shoes. I think your item selections changed a little bit. What items are you looking at maybe a little bit more closely?
Do you want me to double up on what Andrea said, or should I just add on to what she said?
You know, if you want to second some of them, you can very quickly do that. We won't go into great detail, but yeah, a second opinion on them is good. And if there's any in addition to that, you can touch on those as well.
For tools like Andrea mentioned, the flute digital multimeter and a crimping tool, maybe even a battery charger. They do give you a battery charger in the kit of parts, but it's always nice to have a second. Digital multimeter crimping tool I might actually buy at a Princess Auto or any local hardware store instead of using the credits. For hardware, maybe perhaps getting some shaft collars. Motors could be AndyMark 9015, RS775. So I might be going a little too fast for you, Sean, but another one, like Sean just mentioned, was the PG71 gear motor. Comes with an encoder, so it helps for control along the way, especially for younger teams that are trying to figure out the control system. Like Andrea mentioned, 2 Xbox 360 controllers, because that's what you're going to be using to drive the actual robot. I'd advise you to locally source a supplier for batteries, but there is an option to purchase 2 batteries, but you'll get hit with high shipping and handling fees.
Yeah, let's talk about that very quickly because, yes, every team needs more batteries than what is given to you in the kits. And so rookie teams, you will receive batteries as part of your kit. I don't recall exactly how many, but it's really not enough.
You'll get 2.
You'll get 2. And I guess that's based on last year's rules. We don't know what they're going to be for this upcoming year, but it's been 2 in the past. But although First Choice does provide you the opportunity to order more batteries as part of First Choice, the downside is that even if you get your 2 batteries and they're quote-unquote free because you're using these First Choice credits, one caveat is that you do need to pay for shipping for these items coming up from the States because First Choice is run by a company down in the States providing the logistics and the shipping for it. And the shipping is done by weight. And these batteries are extremely heavy. And so the unfortunate part is for the cost of shipping these batteries, oftentimes it ends up being as much as just purchasing the batteries locally. So you may want to hold off on getting those batteries. You'll see they'll sell out very quickly and everyone else will talk about getting them, particularly the teams down in the States. But the States have a different shipping formula, so they're not subject to the same types of costs and charges that we are. So great that you brought that up, Thuvishan. Really important point. But that sounds like some really, really solid recommendations. I think I'd have to agree with just about all of them. And yeah, from my standpoint, you know, I think you guys have pretty much covered all your bases, which brings us to 8 p.m. We're pretty much right on time for this one. But Paul, I think you've been patiently monitoring our audience. Have we got any questions from the audience?
We do have questions. One that keeps coming up from several people is, how many credits do rookie teams get?
All right. Well, this is a tricky one because I don't think we were able to completely answer that question, mostly because it may change for next year. I'm trying to track down what the process was for last year. I'm trying to recall. I think we all had different answers, but maybe we can do this by committee. Thuvishan, did you have a number that you kind of recall for last year what the credits were? Because my memory's a little foggy.
Yeah, the number that I kept coming back to, and I believe all teams had it, was 600.
Okay, and Andrea, I think you and I might have a different recollection because I thought it was like 400 for the first round, and we might have been given 150 more when after after kickoff happened, where it was a two-stage process where they gave us some before kickoff, so you had to order the majority of your parts before you even knew what the game was. But then after kickoff, it was like just a few more, and for some reason I'm remembering 400 and 150. But Andrea, do you have a different recollection?
I think it was 400 and 200, but the main reason they do that is because there's some parts that are kind of game specific, so they don't like to give that away. So yeah, there's normally 2 rounds where they release what is available.
Okay, and Paul, do you have any recollection in terms of credits? I know we've been bouncing around. Generally 600, I think, is kind of what we've come to an agreement on in some way, shape, or form, but done in 2 stages. But Paul, do you have any recollection from last year?
I was thinking of more along the lines what Andrea had said, 2 and 400. I thought the 200 came first, but I could be wrong. But a related question to this one is that everybody gets the same amount of credits, whether you're the same number of credits, whether you're a rookie team or a veteran team.
Yes, and that's my recollection as well, that regardless of whether you're a rookie or second, third, fourth year, 10th year veteran, you're going to get the same number of first choice credits as everyone else. The only difference in terms of being a veteran versus a rookie is at your kickoff, the kits that you get, all rookies will get the additional yellow tote, at least it was yellow last year. But in terms of first choice in the credits, there's no difference in the number of credits, at least last year. I don't know if it's going to change. I'm probably not likely, but that's how it was for prior years.
And we have another question. How do I know what my login is into first choice?
Oh, that's a great question. Okay, so your lead mentor and your alternate mentor will have a login at the First Inspires website, the portal website. And this is where they've registered your team, and the same website where they've registered for their competitions. Unfortunately, I don't actually have a login to be able to demonstrate to you. But when you log in, when first choice is released, after you've logged in, all of your login and password information will be shown on the First Inspires portal. And in fact, I'll extend on that because if you look at the kit of parts and a lot of these vouchers, so all these almost as good as cash vouchers, which are from our sponsors, I believe after kickoff, a lot of these vouchers end up being sort of coupon codes that you can use right on their websites online. So again, also on your First Inspires login on the portal website, those coupon codes will show up, but you're going to need to get your lead mentor or your alternate mentor to log into the portal website. And generally what I would do when I used to be running these teams is as soon as kickoff happened, I'd log in right away. I'd copy and paste all of those voucher codes, just put them into a Google Doc and share them with all the leadership on my team so that if they needed to make a purchase, they could just pull those codes right away. But that's a great question in terms of logins for first choice and for the vouchers as well.
Oh, we just got another one. Okay, so I'll answer this one. So this is again from Chris Edgar. He says he's the lead mentor and he's not seen any voucher codes yet. So essentially what's happening, Chris, is if you keep going back into the dashboard that Sean is showing you in First Inspires, that's going to keep changing. So boxes will appear and they'll disappear. So when you had to do your youth protection plan and you were completed with that, that box then would have disappeared. And as we go along in a timely manner, new boxes will appear, and that's the one Sean is talking about in terms of the first choice. So when they release that, there'll be a notice from First, but then you'll go into your dashboard and you'll see it there, and it'll have all the information you need there.
Yeah, and for those voucher codes in particular, I would not expect them to show up until after kickoff. So that one you're going to need to be a little bit patient on. I think the only exception though might be for the SolidWorks and PTC and Autodesk sponsorships. For those ones, you might actually be able to click on those links right here for software, and my team used SolidWorks, and I think it brings you to a sign-up page. Yeah, it says here, click here to apply for your team sponsorship. These ones they might be a little bit more lenient on, but if you fill out this form, just tell them, I'm a first team. I'd like to request this many licenses. This is my team number. They pretty much should be emailing you back some licenses, shortly afterwards. So that one, I'm not sure what the time limits are on those, but if you're looking for some CAD software, you might be able to try that one now.
So again, back to Chris, because he had a follow-up question. What you're going to see when you log into your dashboard is changes, and there will be a link in there that will take you to first choice, and you'll have the information there, including your team password to get in. So it'll all be in there when it comes up. That's released, it'll all be there.
Yeah, and I think the question Chris also had was, will your login info just transfer to first choice? And the answer to that is no. It won't be the same login that you use. It'll be a different one, and it'll probably be based on your team number, like FRC, 6010, if that happens to be your name. And that's because that login, you may not want to do the first choice purchasing yourself. You may want to hand that off to someone else on your team. So if you don't want to give your own login information away, they've set up a separate one for you that you're a little bit more free to pass around to other people on your team.
And then Chris follows up because he missed the first couple of minutes of the webinar. The page that Sean is showing right now is where all of these information is from last year. So if you see the link at the top of his screen there, that tells you where it's the resource library, FRC, and then 2016 kit of parts. Yeah. So you can get an idea of what's going to happen by looking at what has happened in the past.
Yeah, and there's two ways that you'll be able to get to it. I'll put the link in the YouTube archive after we're done, but also to get to this page quickly, you can actually just Google FRC kit of parts, and this will be the first one. And I'll just make sure I'm not giving you bad information. FRC kit of parts. There's Google, very first link, and this is the 2016 kit of parts, which is actually last year's kit of parts, so just be careful. This is all from last year's competition. The kit of parts from this upcoming year has not been released yet, so this is all old, out-of-date information, so just take that with a grain of salt. A lot of this entire discussion we've been having has been based on last year's information, which is subject to change for next year, but it is meant to at least give you a little bit of background information to help make you give you some background information so you can make a good informed decision when the time comes. But great questions, Chris. Really appreciate it. All right, Paul, are we good for questions for the time being?
Oh, one just popped up. Oh, a smiley face from Chris. Thank you. Thanks, Chris.
All right, and so we've got actually that's the official end of our webinar. So Andrea, Thuvishan, first of all, I'd like to thank you for your time on tonight's webinar. I think there was some really great information that we were able to get out there, and hopefully some teams will be able to make some more informed decisions on their first choice, because I know that's one of the most daunting things, especially for a rookie team where you're just bombarded with this list of parts. And I'd probably say that if all they did was hit rewind on this webinar and just kind of follow along in terms of what your choices were, I think those would be some very, very solid decisions. But if you guys have the time, but please feel free. I'm not going to obligate you anymore. There's no more questions left, but I actually might have a question or two to pose just in a more informal way. But Thuvishan, I'm just going to ask very quickly, are you able to join us for a few minutes? And please don't feel bad to say no, but are you able to join us just for a few more questions?
Yeah, firstly I want to thank having us in the first place, but yeah, I'm free to talk.
Okay, and Andrea, what are your time constraints like?
I'm okay to answer a few questions.
Okay, so just going back, talking about some more specific ones. Excuse me. There's a few items in here that I guess depending on what you're looking for, a lot of teams get really interested in. And so I'll talk about the one at the very bottom, or close to the bottom here, and it would be the Microsoft Lifecam Web Camera. So here it is, Microsoft Lifecam HD 3000. And so some teams might come across that one, and it might pique their interest and sort of go, oh, well, why would you ever use a webcam for this one? And this is an interesting one because I would say if you're more so a veteran team, I know my team picked up this one last year, and we actually ended up purchasing like 2 or 3 more of them because we wanted to do computer vision on our robot. Thuvishan, is this an item that your team has picked up?
We actually did not pick up this specific one, but we actually ended up borrowing one from your team, Sean. And we found the quality to be much better, and it worked for a variety of situations on the robot as a goalie pole for those of you guys, or sorry, not a goalie pole, extension rod with the camera attached, so you get a bird's eye view of the field for those of you guys who knew the 2016 game, but it was very multifaceted, and we were able to use it for a variety of applications.
Okay, so that's funny because my team 610 used this on the robot and plugged it into the RoboRio, which is the robot controller, and we actually programmed our robot to try and automatically find where the goals were on the field and automatically aim itself to varying amounts of success, I'll say. And Thuvishan's team actually used it for a completely different use case. You guys mounted it on, I think it would have been an 11-foot tall pole where your drivers stand, because there were so many obstructions on the field that the drivers at some points could not even see the robot or see the balls or the boulders on the floor. And so by extending a camera 11 feet in the air and pointing it down onto the field, you could look over any obstructions, and that was totally legal, totally within the rules of the game. And so some really interesting use cases. These cameras aren't particularly expensive, but they add up. But in terms of the credit cost, 21st credits, if you are looking for ways to use up your last few credits, assuming that there are any left, because these do run out of stock, these cameras are kind of interesting. Andrea, is this one that your team has looked at all in the past?
We started with some of the older cameras that first had, and we really should have picked this one up because they're a potato by today's standards. The Lifecam HD 3000 is pretty inexpensive, like you said, but it's great quality, and for 20 credits you can't really go on.
Yeah, and actually I think, Paul, we're getting a few good questions in, so I'm going to put that on pause, and Paul, can you help us out there?
Yeah, so a couple of more good questions, again from Chris. Which parts are easy to source from local suppliers? And I guess the other one that applies here is, can we use generic aluminum gears? And I guess part of it will apply to when the game is released and we see the rules.
Okay.
But maybe you guys can talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, can we use generic aluminum gears? Yeah, you can use basically any hardware you want, whether they're aluminum gears or steel gears. You can cut your own gears if you happen to have those facilities at your disposal. I know some teams which are lucky enough to have access to, say, wire EDM, some who just buy gear stock and just cut it themselves. But yeah, to answer your last question, you can pretty much use any gears you want as long as they're not made out of any super exotic material, and I'm talking like uranium or plutonium, things like that. But that's a pretty straightforward answer. Which parts are easy to source from local suppliers? Okay, this is where things get really, really tricky. And maybe it's good for us to highlight the ones which are the most difficult ones to source from local suppliers, because some of the easy ones are fairly obvious. The easy ones you probably can look at, Chris, and say, oh yeah, I know I can get Ethernet cables just about anywhere. But if you don't mind, I'm going to flip it around and sort of say which are the absolute hardest ones to get. And I'll highlight these 3 right off the bat: your pneumatic control module, your power distribution panel, and your voltage regulator, just because these are all FRC specific components. There's really only one manufacturer. There's really only one source to get them, which is from AndyMark. Or rather, I think Vex also supplies them as well. So 2 suppliers. But they run out on a regular basis. So those 3, top of my list, is ones which are really difficult to source locally right off the bat. And Thuvishan, Andrea, off the top of your heads, are there, well, you know what, this gyro and accelerometer, I know you can sort of get industrial strength, gyros and accelerometers, but they're a little bit more difficult, and you end up paying a pretty penny for them. This guy's a custom board that Analog Devices essentially just made specifically for FRC using their particular gyro and accelerometer. That's generally what I find is one of the more difficult ones. Motors, as Thuvishan mentioned, these types of motors specifically, and also because you're limited in terms of motors, there's only a list of approved motors for the FRC competition, and so everything on this list is going to be an approved motor, and those are hard to find locally, and even when you do find them, they run out of stock quite quickly. Thuvishan, Andrea, anything else on the top of your head which is like it's maybe especially hard to source up here in Canada?
Yeah, anything that's provided by the Metro or even AnyMark websites that are specific for that you can't necessarily like. I know that's a blanket statement, but that's all encompassing. It could be like an RS775 motor, which no other producer other than Vexpro produces. I'm hoping some more across-the-road electronics show up on First Choice, so that could maybe mean batteries, which are the control. I guess it's a tool that is used to check the voltage of batteries under load, which is a useful tool for all teams to pick up. Yeah, anything specific to FRC and First that you most likely won't commonly find outside of First Choice, that'd be probably the best place to pick it up.
Yeah. Andrea, any specific items that you've come across that come to top of mind that are really hard to get locally?
So that Clippered air tank, I don't believe it's typically stocked by any pneumatic supplier around here at least. So probably those would have to come over from the States if they were ordered. And then if you're in the GTA, there is suppliers for pneumatic, but if you've never really purchased before, it's kind of a new experience. So if you could get them from here, that'd be pretty easy in comparison. And if you're not in the GTA, you might have a hard time finding things like pneumatic hose and stuff like that, although it is in the rookie kit, so that's always a plus.
Yeah, I would agree with that one, where those items you're not exactly going to walk into an off-the-shelf electronics place like Sale or Active Electronics. You're probably going to have to go to an industrial supplier, which, yeah, once again, if you're in the GTA, you're probably okay, but you're still going to pay a premium for them, especially if you're just a single retail customer. But yeah, Thuvishan, did you also have something else there at the end? No? Okay.
Yeah,
So
I just want to interject. Just Andrea gave me some food for thought. Just for because sorry.
No, go ahead, Thuvishan, my bad.
Can I quickly add one more point?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Essentially, for the point that Andrea just brought out, especially if you are a new or rookie team, a lot of us veteran teams end up talking at competitions and throughout off-season events, and we find out the best suppliers. So if you are wanting to know where to get some of the best locally sourced equipment, then your best bet is probably talking to a few veteran teams and seeing where they get their stuff. And since we've already done all the hard work, quote unquote, you would be able to basically piggyback on some of the research that we've done and acquire some of those resources as well.
Right, and I think, Paul, there was another question which is all related to this exact thread in the conversation. So, Paul, maybe you'd want to ask that one, and I think I can answer that one also quite directly as well.
So some of the stuff relates to what might be in the yellow box, the yellow tote. Is there typically a PDP and a VRM in the kit each year? A follow-up to that was, it sounds like the pneumatic controller is an add-on.
Okay.
It's not, because it's in the yellow tote, I believe.
Yeah, so that is the rookie kit. And so a PDP, a VRM, and a pneumatic controller will all be included in your rookie kit, which is the yellow tote. But for veteran teams, you don't get that yellow tote, and so you would need to get additional ones if you need additional ones. But you were all rookies at one point. All the veterans should have one from when they were rookies. But if you need additional, no, they don't come every year. You only get them once in your rookie year, and then you need to fend for yourself a little bit if you need to get extras or additional ones.
And buying batteries is not easy necessarily, but they're not available, for example, at Canadian Tire.
Okay, so yeah.
There is a supplier in Mississauga.
All right, and so just buying stuff in general, which is what Thuvishan was alluding to, if you're looking for those local sources, on the First Robotics Canada website, I'm just going to go ahead and zoom in here a little bit so that you guys can see this. At the bottom of every page, we have other websites, and there's one here called Canadian Part Suppliers. Thuvishan and Andrea, this actually predates you guys. This has been around for a little while. It's something that I started many, many years ago because I knew this was a challenge, not just for rookie teams, but for veteran teams as well. But I'm just going to click on Canadian Part Suppliers, and this is it's a wiki that's been around for a long time. And this is just basically a wiki that a lot of mentors have contributed who their part suppliers are. And so this is a question from Chris. Where do I get my batteries from? I'll just click in the search bar and just do batteries. I think we've got both singular and plural in here. And so right off the bat, we have 4 pretty good suppliers here for batteries. For no other reason than that they're at the top, I'll click on CEA Battery Zone. And it looks like they've got a part number here for you for a battery that is known to have been legal, at least for that year in 2010. You can click on here and hopefully it's still updated, but if it works, you should be able to see, you should be able to get a few good sources for batteries out there. But unfortunately, if you're asking specifically about SAIL does not cover or carry those specific batteries. They're actually motorcycle batteries, I think is the normal use case for them, but they're 12 volt, 18 amp hour, and in the rules, they actually specifically lay out the requirements for the battery. They'll tell you the dimensions, they'll tell you the weight, they'll tell you the amp hour ratings, and you can pretty much source them from wherever you can as long as they meet all those specs.
One thing to add about the batteries, you're also going to need to purchase some battery leads for them, so just keep that in mind.
And actually, do those battery leads show up on First Choice?
They were in past years. I don't see them now.
There are. So here, battery connector. This is always a really, this hangs up a lot of teams where they have a hard time getting the right connectors to attach to the batteries. And so on First Choice, this might be a good one just to throw in there. I'm glad actually you brought this up, Andrea, but it looks like they're 10 credits. They're out of stock, so they're a popular item. But this is a very specific connector. This is actually a requirement that you must use these exact connectors on your batteries and on your robot in order to power it. All right. Paul, does it look like we are good for our questions for the evening?
Well, we did have a last comment from Christine Bibick, who sends out the weekly e-blast for FRC and FLL Junior. And she did say that she put some battery information in the last one that came out. So if you're not reading completely to the end of those, it would be a good idea to do that because there's particular Canadian information that's there. I know there's a blast that comes out from First HQ on Thursday, but usually Christine's are out on Friday and they have specific Canadian stuff in there. And this week, batteries, and telling people to make sure they sign up for the kickoff.
Yes, and I believe that battery information was actually for that same supplier, CEA Battery Zone. It had some price breakdowns. It had some quantity price breaks in there as well because they are offering a discount for those batteries. Perfect.
And that's it. No more questions, Sean.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Paul, and thank you once again, especially for sticking around for some additional informal Q&A. Really appreciate your insight and your expertise, both Andrea and Thuvishan this evening. Thank you so much. I learned a lot actually in terms of how you guys go about your selection process for First Choice, and I think we were able to deliver a lot of insight for a lot of other teams out there. And actually, there's still, I think there's some last minute questions popping up. Paul, are these ones that you think?
There are.
You know, we still have 6 minutes before 8:30, so I'm willing to take just a few more. I don't want to leave anyone hanging, so.
So that's, so sorry. Yes, Chris, that's the 20% credits, the getting extra game pieces. And Alan, the blast is what Chris sends out every week. So if you're not getting one, we'll send Chris your email so that you can get that.
Yeah, so it's a weekly email blast that goes out to every single Ontario FRC team, and it has Canadian-specific information, just like battery suppliers, which would have been in last week's email. It also would have mentioned the international game piece option, where you could select additional game pieces, but at a pretty deep cost of 20% deduction to your first choice credits, which it sounds like based on the panelists, we would all take advantage of that. That's really still up to you, so we're not going to say definitively that you have to take it or definitely should take it, but it seems to be a pretty good option, especially since in all of our experiences, sometimes we're a little bit hard-pressed to use up all of our first choice credits, which I was actually pretty surprised to hear because I thought that was really only my team which ran into that, but it sounds like you guys also run into that situation as well. So it looks like if you did sign up for the option, it sounds like you've at least got some backing from some veteran teams and some mentors who've been doing this for a little while who are going to be taking advantage of that same option as well. So you're not swimming up the creek alone on that one if it ends up not being a good deal. So if that's any solace to you, that would certainly make me feel a little better at least. But I think that's it. I think that's it for our webinar this evening. Thanks again, everyone. Thuvishan, Andrea, Paul, thanks for moderating as well. Alan, we'll go ahead and we'll make sure that you're added to the email list because I saw that your email has just come in. Because if you're not getting it, that's probably a big thing that we want to get taken care of. But thank you, everyone in the crowd as well, for tuning in. We really appreciate your time. And have yourselves a great evening. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.